Now let's take a look at projecting textures as decals. So in some cases, we may not need to create a UV layout. For instance, if we've got these pictures and picture frames that we want to add an image to, we can just use a projection to do that. So this is 05 begin. Let's add a material to this frame here. So I'm just going to create a new material just for this frame. We'll drop it over here. And now we want to add a file to the color, but we want to change how this is going to be added. So we'll go to create 2D textures, and we'll change this from 2D normal to 2D projection. So with that selected, now when we add a file texture, it's going to be using this 2D projection texture. So we'll go into color, we'll add a file, and then we'll go into the file and add an image. And then we have several of these that we can use. This is kind of a wider picture, so we have some that are more vertical. There's a couple of pictures in here that you can use that are more vertical. If you have your own image, this would be a perfect place to use that as well. There's a couple down here called painting. So I actually think this one's kind of cool. So let's open this one up, and that's now added into the color of our material. So let's turn on our hardware texturing. And you can see right now it doesn't really look all that good. It doesn't really look like we want it to. That's because of the way that this is being projected. So if we come into our hypershade and we select this and map it, we can see that we have this 2D project, which 2D placement, which is normal, and then we also have this place 3D texture. So this is the node that we want to select. Okay, right now you can see that it's right down here at the origin. This is what it's using to project this texture. So think of this as the projector. So it's actually projecting it this way. And so because of that, we're getting all of this streaking happening across the surface. So I'm going to take this up and over. Let's increase the size of this a bit. So I'm just going to scale it. Oops. Just the placement. And then I also want to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate it towards the picture. And I'm going to go minus 90. All right. Now we want basically one instance of this texture. Right now it's wrapping around, so you can see multiple instances. So what we can do is go into our Place 2D Texture node and turn off wrapping. So now it'll only be placed one time. And you can see where it is right there. So we can actually move this around. We don't have to worry about the UVs at all. We can come into, let's come into the side view, and we can place this a little bit better. Okay, so let's size this so it's just inside of the frame. And I'll scale it out a little bit too. It doesn't have to be perfectly square. Kind of scale this in a little bit. Let's move this in a bit. And same thing in here. And so there we get one instance of this picture. Okay, now it's going kind of extending out a little bit further, and so I want to kind of bring it right in there. Now, because this isn't wrapping, we get a kind of a color across this frame, and that color is derived, if we go into the actual image file, the color is coming from this default color. So one of the cool things here is that we can actually get the color of our frame by just changing the color balance within our image file itself. So if we wanted this frame to be kind of a brown color, we could just select this default color, and we could choose maybe a brown color. And you can see that that color shows through because this image isn't wrapping, it's stopping here, 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 here. Then it shows that default color through. It shows it through wherever that picture isn't. Okay. Now, if you wanted to also modify the picture itself, you could modify the color gain to kind of take that down a little bit, and then you could, change any of your material attributes that you wanted to. If we move this a bit closer, it's not going to change anything. If we move it to the side, though, that will change things. So this is one way to add a simple image or something like a picture, and then also for free get kind of the color for the frame. And we didn't have to do any UVs. So, you could have laid out the UVs and then gone into Photoshop and added this painting as part of the image and then made part of the image brown where those UVs were. But here we're able to just use this single node to cast this image onto our object. This is good for anytime you want to add something like a decal to a to part of your model. And for interiors, it works good for things like pictures and tags and things like that. So that's how we can use our placement. Just remember to set this back when you're done. So 2D textures, you can set that back to normal so that when you go in and start to create other nodes in here later on, it's not set to 2D projection. You want to set that back to 2D normal. That's going to be your default method of working. Okay, so the next thing that we can talk about is tiling smaller textures. Sometimes you won't have an image that you can use for the whole thing. You have a little section of an image that you can use. How do we create those tiling textures, and then how do we apply those? So we'll talk about that next.